normally this is more or less the presentation that I do, which is barely focused in architecture, but I will also try to explain all the organizational details and legal or economic, whatever thing you might find interesting. Because as Masha was saying, this is quite a new model here in Spain. This was a little bit a pilot project, but after that, more projects have started and it's becoming more a real alternative or even a public policy in certain cities of Spain. So I think from what I know, we are more or less on the same page, maybe in a 7-year age difference. No, so maybe now we are seeing the results of something that we were doing 7-8 years ago. So for us, yeah, I will focus on those 3 things, but as I mentioned, probably I will touch other stuff. But it's important that you take into account that what I'm going to explain today, we've been living now there in this COP for a little bit more than a year, but it's a long process that for us started in 2012, more or less, after or as a neighborhood organization, people meeting and discussing about the lack of affordable housing, which is a problem in Spain forever. It's a structural problem of our country, the lack of affordable housing. So in 2012, a small group of people got together to start discussing the question and looking for alternative. They came across the cooperative housing model. We had cooperative housing in Spain, especially during the 70s, but it was based on buying. So the cooperative would make the construction of the building and then resell the units to the members and then dismantle the cooperative. So we wanted to do something different where the cooperative stays in the long term and manages the units. In this way, the units are always affordable, no? Because what happened with these cooperatives on the 70s is that now the units ended up in the free market. So they are at the free market price and they are not affordable anymore. So what you see here in this diagram that we are now updating is all the different important aspects, no? Because it was not only an architectural project that we did a lot of research and innovation, but also it was the same for legal, for economic, for social aspects, no? Even for the organization was a little bit of a challenge, no? And you see on the lower part how it's becoming more and more complex, and now we are actually in a moment of reorganizing this organization that we had with or that we have still with the General Assembly, with the different commissions, with the different working groups, and now we are trying to do something more simple, more based on the everyday life than into trying to make a big project like we were doing in the previous years. To begin with, we are based in Barcelona in a neighborhood called Sants. That is a very working class neighborhood. The origin is from factories and workers who came here to work in the factories. And actually the project is based here in the premises of an old factory called Can Batlló. This factory was being emptied and without use for decades. And in 2011, after a long process of fight from the neighborhood associations from the area, we managed to get a leasehold for one of the buildings of the factory. Now, after 9 years of being there, we obtained many other spaces, and it's what you see here on the map to the right. All these spaces on red are spaces that are now managed by the community, and that we have a leasehold of those spaces for 30 years. And then on top of that, is the site of La Borda, no? And so this project also didn't came from nowhere, but actually started from a group that was already engaged in the community and engaged on trying to find solutions and alternative to several aspects. So this smaller group of people who got together to find alternative for housing, once they found the idea and the basics on what they had in mind, they approached the municipality, and the municipality of Barcelona was also keen to find other alternative projects of housing. So we managed to get a leasehold of this land. It's a public land, and now we have a leasehold for 75 years. We pay a rent for this land, like 4,000 euros per year, and we are obliged to do social housing here, meaning that the people that lives here, they are under the threshold of definition of social housing. So there is a maximum of income. You cannot own any other property, and you should have been living in Barcelona for 2 years, registered in the census. This was the moment of the groundbreaking ceremony when we finally got the land, and you see how happy people was. And one of the important aspects of this type of projects, no, is that because we know who's going to live there, we have a total different relation to collective housing than the average project. No, the conventional projects, the client of the collective housing is not the final user; it's the promoter, the developer. Either is a real estate private company or is a public organization doing social housing, but the one who's discussing how details of the housing should be done are not the benefit, the one who's going to use it. So what we see is that most of the housing that is produced is not always done meeting the real needs or real wills of the people, but actually following principles of the market. So maybe trying to make houses that make more profit, houses that are easier to sell to somebody else, maybe, but not meeting your expectations. Or in the case of public housing, most of the times is thinking that the user as a nuisance, as somebody who can make damage to the building, that can cause trouble. So it's done in a way that it's easier to manage, not easier to live in. On the contrary, what we have here is that we know the people, so we can discuss with the people as architects or as economists or as lawyers, and people can discuss among them and themselves, and think how they want to live, look who they are, and this for us is one of the main changers on this type of housing. So as a clear example, what we had here, we have 28 units, and we look at the social composition demographics of the units, and there was only one that was mother, father, and 2 children, which is probably the idea that we have as a conventional family. So it was only one of 28. The other 27 were singles that live on their own, couples without children, single parents or mothers that live with their children or separated, divorced, so they have maybe the children 1 every 2 weeks. Or even we had a group of adults that wanted to live together with the children of one of them. So we have a variety of households compositions, which is actually the majority in our society. The majority of households in Spain are not 2 parents with 2 children, or even one or some children. It's all this diversity. But when we look at the housing stock, what we see is bigger apartments with a lot of rooms, thinking on this traditional family, which is not the majority. So here we could start thinking, okay, housing maybe can be done in a different way. So we also took this opportunity to rethink what we link or what we do with housing. You know, all the activities that we do in the house, because sometimes we also have in mind, you know, the houses where you go to sleep and to eat, maybe one or two of the meals of the day, but this is not the it's not the full picture. No, there's a lot of other things that we do related to housing and that are very important. No, and things related to safety, to leisure, to taking care of oneself or taking care of of other people, or that we receive care from others. It's also always been a place for work. No, not only now with all this COVID situation, but since always it's been a place for work for many people. It's also a place for meeting others or for isolating us from others. It's also a place for cleaning. No, there's a lot of activities that are related to housing. And even there is a bunch of things that are related to housing that maybe we don't think it's part of the house, but it is, no, and it's related. For instance, mobility, no, we need space for park our cars or bikes or whatever we use. We need energy that has to come from somewhere and can be also produced in the home. No, so there's a lot of activities that relate to housing and that we forget about them. And also, we use this project as a excuse, no, to rethink where do we have to do these activities, no, because maybe not all of them have to be done at the household sphere. Maybe some of them have to be done in a smaller sphere, meaning only you in your room, or maybe some of them can be done shared with other households, with other houses. Maybe some of them can be done with the whole community, with the whole building. Or maybe there's some of them that maybe you don't need them to be resolved in the building and can be done in the city, in the neighborhood, elsewhere, no, and you don't need them in the house. So what we try to do in the case of La Borda and many of the projects that we are doing is to go from this idea of collective housing being a collection of individual units plus the minimum common spaces, no, because these are normally spaces that cost money but don't function more than circulation for the case of stairs, corridors, elevators, maybe the common rooftop because you need it for the mechanical ventilation or whatever. So coming from this scheme to a scheme of having community spaces where we can have some of these activities that we were seeing before, no? So what we did in the case of La Borda, on an abstract way, was to reduce the surface of the housing, more or less 10 square meters, and that each apartment give these square meters to the community. No? So at the end, we have almost 300 square meters of community spaces. In the case of La Borda, but in each cooperative changes because this is decided by the community. We have a big kitchen and dining room, even if every apartment has its own kitchen. Then a laundry, a guest room. We're gonna have a health area for receiving medical care and massages, and maybe if you need to clean another person, so a big hot tub. And then a multi-purpose room. You're gonna see some images. And then as exterior spaces, we have a bike parking, a big courtyard, terrace and a green roof, and storage. And why sharing? There's many positive aspects and many reasons to do so. The first of all, it's for economy in all senses, no? For economy, like money economy, but also for sustainability, for saving resources, for saving energy, for saving space. And for us, the most clear or easy to explain is the washing machine. I don't know how is it in Slovenia, but in Spain, it's not, you cannot conceive a house without a washing machine. No, I know in Nordic countries it's more common, but in Spain it's not. And that would mean that in Barcelona, we would have 28 washing machines for 28 units. What we have now, it's instead 2 industrial machines and 1 domestic washing machine. And I can assure you that this is even more than the one that we need. No, we are now considering even taking one of the industrial washing machines, because those are utilities that we barely use. Even if you are a big family with 5 children that do sports, maybe you use it 2 hours a week, or 3 hours a week. So that means that the rest of the week is taking space, consuming space, heating, energy, and so on. So instead, this is something that we have put in common to save. Also to be more efficient. We studied the different systems that we could use with industrials or domestic washing machines, and so it was not only a question of saving space, but being more efficient. But also there's another positive aspect and another reason to do so, which is that what we did also, all the spaces that we put in common, most of them were spaces related to everyday activities, meaning taking care, cooking, cleaning. Those activities, when we look at the house, first of all, they've been done historically and still nowadays by women. Those are very femininized activities. And second of all, they've been given the worst spaces, spaces without light, spaces, small spaces where only one person can be. So what we've been doing here is we've been giving the best spaces and giving a lot of space to those activities on a way that they can be visible for the whole community who is doing those tasks, but also that you can do it with others, that you don't have to be on your own. And so maybe you can do it with your partner and you're doing both, doing the laundry, or maybe you are taking care of your children and you are doing both at the same time. So it's not a coincidence that you see here in these pictures in the washing machines while she's doing the washing machine, taking care of her kid, or here on where we hang the laundry, there's also him taking care of his kid. I'm gonna go now for some aspect for the sustainability aspect, but maybe I'm gonna touch that more briefly. But for us, it was also important to make a building that was very sustainable, not only because we believe in it, we think that this is the way to do it and that we should take care of our environment and for the future generations and for ourselves and for the environment itself, but also for a political point of view, and statement. Another positive aspect of knowing the community that was going to live there was that we could measure ourselves and study ourselves, and we realized of something very astonishing for us, which was that there was a lot of families that were living in a energy poverty situation before moving to La Borda. They were living in old apartments without heating, very bad, isolated, and then in winter they would not use the electric heating because they could not pay the electricity bills if they would be using all the electricity that they needed to heat their apartments, meaning that they would be living in units that were not properly heated and then living in a bad health condition. So when we are trying to do housing that consumes as less as possible, it's also because we don't want people to be in a situation that they cannot pay the heating, for instance, and especially now when we're thinking on the future and climate change and maybe energy scarcity. So we have to take into account all these things. But anyway, we also did the building as much sustainable as we could because we believe in it. So here in this graph, you see on the left of each graph is the current housing stock in Spain. In the middle, what the current regulations ask you to fulfill for consumption and material and waste and so on. And on the right, what we did with our building. No? And you see that when it comes to energy, materials, footprint, and waste, we managed to do a huge reduction. Not so much for the water. The final numbers are not the ones on those graphs, because it was harder for us in Spain or in Barcelona. The climate is not very good for taking the rain from the water, from the water from the rain, sorry, and so on. This is the basic cut of the building, how the building is distributed. So we have from the 28, 24 of the units are here on the left, which are facing south in front of a park. So this is a very good orientation. So only 4 are facing north and facing the street. And here we have most of the communal spaces. And in the ground floor as well, we have most of the communal spaces because those are the worst positions for the building. And then in the middle, we have this big corridor and patio, which is covered with a winter house that help us to control the climate, especially in winter, but also in summer helps ventilation. And this is another example where the participation of the user change the layout of the conventional building. No? So we wanted a building that actually enhances the social activity and meeting each other. No? So instead of having what here would be the more classical design, which is you have a corridor, a stairs, and then another corridor, and you get into your house, and maybe you cross one neighbor every 2 weeks. Here, what we have is a design that at the moment that you open the door of your house, you see all the houses and you see all the communal spaces. So at the end, we are giving more opportunities for people to meet. This is something that you can do with design. Then people, they have their own decision on if they want to say hi or not to the other person. So it's not that the architecture is going to make everybody good friends and happy, but at least we are giving a chance for this to happen. I'm going to skip maybe the sustainability aspects, and if you have more questions, I can go back to that later. This is the winter house, which is the only part of the building that is automatized, no, it's self-working with wind, light, and heat sensors. And these are the balconies that help us, especially in summer, that the sun doesn't get into the house, but also they are useful spaces for us. No? In Barcelona, like 9-10 months of the year, you can be using this balcony and using it as a room. And this was something that was expressed also as very important for the community at the beginning, no? That we wanted exterior spaces. And if you see in the middle image next to us, there is this social housing block that was done just 1 year before us. And it has no balconies, no? It has these smaller windows without exterior space. And this is an example of what I was telling you, no? Of the mismatch of what people really want and what the client, in this case, I think it was the municipality, was asking the designers to do, no? Because maybe it was cheaper and they didn't want to spend much more money on that. But obviously, it's not what people were asking for. This is the green roof. Now, half of it is colonized with solar panels that we could not install on the first phase. And this is something that we incorporated and that normally we do with our projects, that we tend to work with communities with not a lot of budget. So we incorporate stages or phases, no? So we did the minimum that we needed for living in, to moving in. And later, when the community manages to get more funding, they can do the next steps. No, so we didn't have the money to make the solar panels at the beginning, but now after a year we installed them. But it's also important to stress that our way of thinking on sustainability, it's very embedded as well with the community and with the users. No, we don't believe in a sustainability done with super expensive materials, with high-tech machines that are expensive to maintain. But we think that users can play a huge role in making the building work efficiently and in a sustainable way. No, so here in this image, you see one of my colleagues explaining to the inhabitants how the mechanical ventilation has to be used in a way that in winter we don't lose energy from the house. No, so only with this small mechanism we manage to save a lot of energy consumption in winter, but it can be done only if people knows how they have to do with their house, either if they are there, if they are not there, if they're doing different activities. No, they know now, they know that they have to close the windows in a certain way, open the certain machines in a certain way. No, and this can be done only engaging the user in the design and in the living stage. No? And I think this is one of the final things on sustainability, but actually that touches many other things. So, and I always like to explain it. So this building also doesn't have underground parking. This was also something that we could do because we knew the community. We knew that from the 28 families, I think it was only 8 had a car. And most of them, they already had a parking space because they lived in the neighborhood. But the legislation, the regulations in Barcelona forced us to have, for every new building, a certain amount of parking space. This is a regulation that is in most of Western cities, no? And now we know that in the United States, many cities are reconsidering these minimum parking requirements. And as far as I know, I think Barcelona was one of the first to do it in Europe. And it was because we were also pushing the political parties and the government, and we managed to change the regulations. So now this is not, they lowered the minimum requirements for parking. And the La Borda was the first building to apply to this change, but it's now a change that affects all new buildings that are of high sustainability performance. No, and this was also important for 3 reasons. No, like first, sustainability aspect related to mobility. We don't believe that housing should encourage people to have a car. Sustainability aspects also for the material consumption. So we were doing a super sustainable building, but then we needed to dig 2 floors under the ground level and pour a lot of concrete, which was super unsustainable. And also it was making our housing more expensive. No, we estimated that it was around 20 to 25% more expensive, the building, because of this underground parking construction. No? So they were forcing us to do something that we didn't want, and besides, it was making housing less affordable. So happily, we managed to change this regulation. And then the last big decision that we took in terms of sustainability was to construct the building, the structure made of CLT panels, timber, was made of timber, and it has like the small foundations of concrete. The ground floor is also made of concrete, but then on top of that we have 4 and 6 floors of CLT panels. No, and this was a little bit more expensive, but at the end we managed to lower the final cost because it was faster. Normally with concrete, you have to make 1 floor, put the concrete, wait it to dry, wait it to strength, then put the structure for the next layer. While here, we only needed 4 people, 4 workers and a crane. And in 6 weeks, they managed to make the entire building. No, so every week there was a new floor. So we managed to save some money from the construction works because then they were shorter. No, and then also the good part of wood is that we could use some of the structure as a finishing. No, you see the stairs are still with a completely all the wood exposed, and the inside the house, especially the ceilings and some of the walls are also exposed, and we didn't need extra walls or extra finishing. And obviously the biggest reason was because it was way more sustainable. No, so the CO2 footprint was even negative. The energy consumption, water consumption, and now the building is also 90% reusable if we have to dismantle it. And I will jump now to the last part, which I will explain you the layout that we have of the units, because we wanted to think on a house of unit that serve you for your entire life. No, the idea of this project is that you can live there forever. No, so I didn't explain the grant of use model, which is that the COP is the owner of the building, and then it gives to every user the right of use of each apartment. But the moment that you don't need it, you give back this right of use to the cooperative, and the cooperative decides who's gonna move in there. No, so you cannot sublet, you cannot resell the right to live there, because this is something that belongs to the cooperative. So this way we manage that the prices are stable, but also this right of use is as long as you need it. No, so you can live there and happily die there and live your entire life in there. No, so we wanted to make a housing that was flexible. No, because also we live in our conventional housing. It's done in a way that it's not very flexible, but it's also not very logical. No, like my parents live in the same house that when my brother and I were living there. No, and nothing changed. In an apartment where 4 people live, now 2 people live. No, and maybe it doesn't have to be like that. So what we decided was to make 3 typologies. The smaller one has 40 square meter. The bigger are almost 60 square meter, and the middle, sorry, and the bigger, it's like 75 square meter. And what we did is that everything comes from this basic unit of 40 square meter, the minimum unit, and which will be these black stripes that you see in this plan. And in between of each of these basic units, we have 2 rooms. So depending if you have 1 bedroom of this, you would have middle apartment. If you have 2 of these bedrooms, you would have a bigger apartment. No, and this can change in the future. No, it doesn't have. Now we have 1 layout done with the community that is living there now, but actually this can change. I will go back to this later, but actually what we have is that the structure is already prepared to transfer these rooms to 1 apartment or the other. So for instance, these are all the connections of the different rooms, but obviously now they are close with plasterboard, with acoustic isolation. So for instance, this is the case of a medium apartment that only has 1 extra room here. If it would be a small apartment, this would be closed. If it will be a big apartment, there will be another opening here with another room. But if in the future the people living here don't need this room and then their neighbors want to use it, they can close it and they can give it to their neighbors. Or even these rooms that face the public corridor, they can be closed in both sides and be accessed from the corridor. No, so if maybe another family from another floor needs it, they can use it as a, we call it satellite room. And another important aspect of the basic layout of the units is that we follow what is called like a non-hierarchical space. No, like I was telling you at the beginning that there is a mismatch between the diversity of households that we have and the housing stock that is out there. And normally when you look at a conventional house, you can very quickly say, okay, this is the bedroom of the parents that have a bathroom attached to it. This is the bathroom of the children because it's smaller. And we didn't want that, no, because it doesn't respond the real needs of people. So instead, what you see is that all the rooms are more or less the same size. And what we did was a basic thing to decide, which was the bathroom that you see in red here, which was in the middle of the basic unit. That would be this vertical rectangle. And then users could decide where they wanted to put the kitchen around this bathroom. And then because the different rooms can fulfill different reasons, different uses, we have 28 units that come from the same matrix and that are all completely different. No, there's some people who put the bedroom here, some people who put a bedroom here, some people who put it here, some people who have a living room extended in 2 rooms, some people who have it only in 1 room. No, so each user could decide how they wanted to live and how they wanted to use the apartment. No? Some people left this big space open, some other people close it and even close it here with newer walls, etc. So these are some images of the medium apartments. See, in this case, the kitchen is all along this corridor, while here it's on L shape here. Some people have closed here with another room. No, so there is a lot of diversity on how people adapted their house to their needs. And you see here, no, again, all the different, when we map how people has been using their house, they are all completely different. And then a last thing we incorporated into this project was self-construction. So people, future inhabitants, and also people who supported the project came during the construction and especially later, once it was finished, to build some parts of the building, especially parts that were maybe extra because we didn't want to slow down the process. But this allowed us for a couple of things. No, first of all, to save money. No, we save money of professional work with volunteer work, and also to create community. No, so these were days where we would be working the entire day. Somebody would cook for all the community. At the end, also some people would take care of the children of all the community. So these were also opportunities for us to make bonds, no, and to get to know each other. So this kind of activities help us that the moment that we moved in, we already knew each other a lot, you know, because we had all these opportunities to engage. And here's a little bit the result. So this is the north facade facing the street, which is more closed because this is one of the few moments that has sunlight, indeed, direct sun. And this is the south. Here in the future is going to be a park. It's now the project is underway. And then on the ground floor, what we have, I told you, is the communal kitchen and dining room, the bike parking at the entrance, and then on top, facing the street, we have a retail space that we rented to a food co-op that was already existing in the neighborhood, which is also very convenient to take into account all this activity of food, of cooking and everything. So at the entrance, we have this space that we're still now finishing. This weekend, we're gonna do the closings from the cabinets and all the spaces, but it's a big kind of a restaurant kitchen. This is the food cup at the entrance. Also, the entrance is done through a passageway that connects with the future park. And this is the central corridor I was telling you, that you see that those are the entrances to the different units. So obviously you have privacy if you want. You can install curtains and there's different mechanisms for keeping privacy, but also there is this idea that you can see the rest of the community the moment that you get out of your house. No? That's the multifunctional space. Something also that has to be finished, which is the laundry room. There will be a wall here in the future and a mezzanine level here, but we didn't have time to finish that yet. And this is for big gatherings, for small parties, and especially now for the children. No, it's become the playground of the building. And also you see how people take care of or appropriate themselves from the different corridor spaces. And that was it for the architectural aspect. I have just this small slide for the finance, which I guess might be interesting for you as well. In this case, it was a completely self-funded project. So the municipality gave us the land, and that was all. Here, what we did is that it was a €3 million project. So it was not a small thing. And what we did is that people had to put upfront around 20% of the cost, which was this 18,500 euros per household. This is what you get back if you leave the project, and then the next family puts the same. It's more than we wanted. We know that this can be very rare, no? This can let some people out. And actually what we did also is inside the community, those people who could not save this money in the amount of time that we had, they had more time to do it. And the people who had more money, they lent the money to this who didn't have this money. And then the other 80% that we needed, the rest, was mostly obtained with loans, with credit. And we did it in a way that we didn't went to any conventional banking. No? I don't know, in Slovenia, probably it's the same, but in Spain, banks are not the best when it comes to values, social values. So we tried to obtain the funding from other sources. So basically, there was a big loan from a COP57, which is, in English, they call it a credit union. It's a cooperative of other cooperatives that put their savings there. And this money is led to social projects to start, no, as a loan. And then also we did a campaign of a kind of a sort of a micro loan, no? So instead of doing a crowdfunding campaign of asking people to give us money for free, we asked people to let us money, and then we would give them a small interest. And this was very successful, and we obtained only in 19 days 865,000 euros, which is this yellow part, from 300 different people and cooperative. But now what we are trying is we are trying to convince the government to make some sort of public bank that lets money to these projects on a very small interest, no? And in order to make all this very more simple and to make the initial contribution lower as well. And it seems that we are getting there with the regional government. And then at the very last minute, we got subsidy, which here is this red part. from the central government, which helped us a lot, but we didn't count on that because it really came literally the last week of the construction. And now we have to pay back all these loans. So what we have are monthly fees, which will be similar to a social rent. In this case, we pay depending on the surface. So on average, we pay 500 euros per unit, plus the supplies. Smaller units pay less than 400, and the bigger units pay 600. And this is, for you to have an idea, it's less than half of the price market would be for the building of this characteristic in this neighborhood. So this is mostly going to pay back the loans. Some of it, we save it for maintenance and for current cost. And our idea is that in the future, when we manage to pay back the loan, we don't want to lower the rent because it's quite affordable already. So our idea is to save money just in case in the future we need it for big renovations, or if you want to fund another housing project. But that will be in more than 30 years now. And as I told you at the beginning, this was kind of a pilot project for everyone. But once the municipality of Barcelona saw that this was a successful model, they turn it into a public policy. So what they've been doing is every year they open a competition for new groups who want to apply for plots. They offer plots to these groups. Last year they offered, at the end finally was 5 plots that are now under construction. And this summer they offered 3 new plots that are not even in the map because I didn't have time to update it. But for instance, next to La Borda, there's going to be a second Borda with the people who were on the waiting list that applied for a new plot. And also not only in Barcelona, but in other cities and towns, also smaller towns in Catalonia, are other projects happening, both from public land, but also from private land, from people who organize and buys the land and tries to make similar projects. And similar to Spain, like other cities in Spain, is happening the same. And because this is quite a new and complex project or model, we've been also busy trying to create materials and knowledge for people to understand how it's done. No? So for instance, we've done this leaflet with a foundation called La Dinamo that explains for new people who don't know the process, how the process is done in order from the very beginning to when you finally move into one of these projects. So all the things that you need to do when it comes to social, to legal, to inhabiting and architecture, and to economic aspects, no? Because it is a complex process, and our idea is we are finding ways to make it more and more simple, so people don't have to be maybe 6-7 years doing the project like we did, because we know that this can be exhausting and very challenging for most of the population. So we're trying to make times shorter, to make easier to access funding, to access land, and to make these things simpler, no? And all the things that we do, we try to release them kind of open source, so people can take, for instance, our legal documents and they can use them for their own projects. So finally, I leave you some links. This is, well, you have the link from La Borda that is also in English. You have the link if you're interested in the architectural side of, this is the link of my office. It's only in Catalan, but it's mostly pictures, so it should be easy for you. This is the foundation I was telling you. It has a specific site that says recursos, which means resources. And there you find things like this leaflet, but also other documents that we produce or we found interesting, and many of them are in English. So I advise you to have a look. And if you speak Spanish, we published a book about cooperative housing and how the basics of it, but it's only in Spanish. I'm sorry. So if you read Spanish, you should have a look to this.